Coming up next, we've got Jared Flash Gordon taking on Mark the Olympian Madsen. Jared Gordon is coming off a controversial loss to Paddy Pimblett, which I'm sure everyone has heard about. That happened in December, as well as right after that, a no contest to Bobby Green due to an accidental clash of heads. That happened in April. Now we are looking at a November bout versus the former silver medalist in Mark Madsen. Mark Madsen has a very, very heavy wrestling background, as you can tell by his Olympic silver medal that he won at the age of 31 years old, which I found to be super impressive that when you're in those early 30s that you're able to pull off Olympic medal, I think is super cool. The other thing with Jared Gordon before I go into Madsen, and I'll let you talk a little bit more about Madsen. Gordon's got a 7-5 record in the UFC. I think that we're starting to see a bit of a upward tick for him, if you will. Maybe not necessarily an upward tick that gets him into like the top 10 of the lightweight division, but maybe somewhere where he's like right there in that 11 to 15 range at his peak, where we saw him really stop that Paddy Pimblett hype train, which I thought was hilarious. Could not have had a worse press week for Paddy leading up to that fight with the beef with Ariel, and then going up and then arguably losing that fight to Jared Gordon, which only one member of the press graded as a win for Paddy. However, I think that Jared Gordon is very well-rounded compared to what Madsen has to offer. He fights out of the Renzo Gracie Academy as well as goes to Killcliff FC2 and has that jiu-jitsu background. He's got good takedown defense as well as solid striking. So, I mean, a much more well-rounded package than what you're going to get out of Mark Madsen, who he started 4-0 in the UFC. He's got wins over Austin Hubbard, who you guys probably remember. If you don't remember him from his first stint in the UFC, you definitely remember him from the Ultimate Fighter season this year. Clay Guida, which it's a resume builder, I guess, as well as Vince Pichel, who was supposed to fight last weekend, unfortunately did not. And then he took on his first loss a year ago against Grant Dawson, who just recently featured on the main card against Bobby Green, who I just talked about with Jared Gordon. There's a lot of correlations here, folks, but that's the lightweight division for you. Rick, what do you have to say about Mark Madsen? I mean, I know there's some specialists you like, some you don't. What do you think?
The UFC is very deliberately trying to get rid of Mark Madsen's in what they do. The UFC is trying to reward damage, not wrestling, and that is what Mark Madsen does. He's the Greco-Roman Olympian wrestler that's now trying at the ripe age of 39? Yeah, 39, to add different elements to his MMA game. And I mean, he's shown some improvements in his striking and in his ground and pound and a little bit in the BJJ. But how much better is it going to get when you're that old? And when your cardio is declining, and so is your durability as well. And we saw that in the last fight when he took that step up in competition and got ran over by Grant Dawson and finally choked in the third round. But, it's going to be a matter of – this fight will come down to two things. It'll come down to whether or not, obviously, Jared Gordon can stuff the takedowns, which he's had trouble with in the past. His offensive wrestling is good. His defensive wrestling is terrible, which you might not think correlates, but they definitely that definitely is the case for some fighters. But Jared Gordon is going to have the distinct advantage on the feet. Mark Madsen, once he gets to the ground, doesn't really do much with it. He'll be able to hold you there, and Jared Gordon has been held down on the ground, but he doesn't really do much. He's getting better with his ground and pound, but it's not overwhelming. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing you're trying to like wiggle out of before you die. But he's not progressing into mount or crucifix positions. He's just sort of sitting there in guard and making sure that you don't move. And he's going to outpoint you that way. And that's how pretty much every fight has gone, other than his debut where he finished a guy by ground and pound, ironically. But then he went decision, then he got choked out. So we know what it is for him, and the odds sort of tell that story as well. The over is set to 2.5, with the over being at minus 280, which you don't really see often for lightweights. I've got Jared Gordon, if I can speak. I've got Jared Gordon. He's minus 180 right now. And he's continuing to grow. He's minus 190 in some shops. So I recommend getting on this as soon as you get a hold of this podcast, because it's going to continue to grow, because he's just got so many more avenues to be able to win this fight than just wrestling in top pressure.
Yeah, so for what it is, I think Jared Gordon is a decision machine. Like, he's not going to submit Mark Madsen, but I also don't think he's going to put on such a risky striking clinic against Madsen, where Madsen can take advantage of of Gordon and get the position that he likes and that he desires in this fight. I think Gordon's going to play safe. He's going to play calculated. The history of his game has shown so. And he's going to be well-rounded against Madsen, as I've touched on several times. I agree with you. His takedown defense isn't spectacular. I think it's good enough to get by where he's going to be able to mix in other stuff to kind of keep Madsen at bay. And honestly, like Madsen's so one-dimensional that a veteran in the octagon like Gordon should be able to take care of business. So I'm not going with Gordon moneyline here. I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going with Gordon by decision at plus 125. That is on Bet Online. I'm doing 3/4 of unit on that play, as I did on my previous, as well as I'm going to do Jared Gordon by unanimous decision at plus 150 for half a unit. So I've got 1.25 units total on this. Kind of a little bit of a mixed bag, but I do think that he gets the decision. I would be shocked if it's a split decision. So that's why I threw another half unit sprinkle on the unanimous decision at plus 150 odds. So I've got Jared Gordon, or we both have Jared Gordon to win the fight. Rick's got him on the money line in a parlay with Jamal Emmers for a plus 117 win, and that's for 1 unit. I'm going with Jared Gordon by decision plus 125 and Jared Gordon unanimous decision plus 150 for 3/4 of a unit as well as half a unit respectively. Stick with us as we continue on with this awesome UFC 295 prelim. And we continue on with Nazim Sadikov going up against Slava Claus.